Joining me now is James Lindsay. Many of you already know who he is because he has a lot of followers on X, on social media, and but some of you maybe don't. So we'll bring him on, let him introduce himself to you. James, welcome back to the broadcast. Thank you for being with us. I know you've just returned from several days in Israel. I know you're jet lagged. So thank you so much for making time for our audience tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, by the way, did you get some kind of award while you were in Israel?
No, I just went and I saw the country. I saw the story. I was asked to speak once by contract before I went. So I spoke near the end, but they actually ended up having me speak at 3 different venues while I was there. So It was really a productive trip.
Good. All right. Someone told me you were being honored for being a righteous Gentile standing up for the Jews, but you are doing that, though. You are doing that, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And rumors of that kind have reached me too, but there was no honoring yet. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, tell me, how old are you?
I am 46 years old.
Okay, so you're 46. You look very young, so that's why I asked. And you're trying to reach this generation that is being largely taken in by Nick Fuentes. Now, I've not spent a lot of time talking about him until this week because Tucker Carlson interviewing him and his praising Stalin, and we've played the clip, and calling him a great man. And then his attack on the Jews. I just watched another video that my son, who's our vice president of operations, showed me from a few months ago, I guess, where Nick is talking about how great it'd be if China took over and cut off the hands of black people that were stealing and all these other. I'm like, this guy, is he that full on racist and anti-Semitic? I mean, the stuff coming out of his mouth, is he a shock jock? Does he really believe this? If he is a shock jock doing it for ratings, the problem is, it's wrong still, and he's influencing a lot of people with this. What do you know about this guy? Where did he come from? Is anyone funding him?
I would love to know if somebody's funding him or where he came from. I know that he lives in Chicago. I know that he started this kind of much more radical movement among young conservatives over 10 years ago or around 10 years ago, even though he's only 28 years old now. And that he set his sights on kind of latching on to Turning Point USA as a growth strategy by doing this technique where he'll send people in and get attention and kind of infiltrate the events. And Charlie Kirk was having none of it. Within a few years, Charlie kind of had his number, banned him and his followers from basically everything. I think he is probably at least semi-serious with these beliefs that he expresses, but it's hard to say. He claims everything is a joke when he gets caught, and that stretches across the gamut of these beliefs. He always gives himself a little nugget of plausible deniability. He'll say all this crazy stuff like you mentioned, and then he'll say, I never call for political violence. So he gives himself a little bit of an out. So it's very difficult to tell for sure what he believes, but like you said, he's influencing a increasingly large body of young people. He's drawn heavily off of the Turning Point USA crowd, which has accelerated, obviously, since Charlie's murder. And he's radicalizing a lot of them. A lot of them are actually troubled people who have problems with alcoholism, problems with pornography, problems with other things, who are not well. And a lot of them take it very seriously. He runs his operation openly as a cult. He has a cult pledge, which is, and I quote, I will, how's it go? I will kill, rape, and die for Nicholas J. Fuentes. If I'm not mistaken, those are the 3 things. So he openly says he's running a cult, and he has a lot of young people who are kind of the lost boys of Gen Z caught up in this, believing that the things he says about Jews and Israel and racial minorities and gay people and everything else and women are all secret truths that we've all lost, and that's why our society is going sideways.
So dangerous. And then Tucker gives him a platform. And what's so concerning is that Tucker has not yet, I don't think, been canceled from being a keynote speaker at the Turning Point USA event coming up in December. And yet, doesn't Nick say things about Kirk's wife and his death? Is he not saying some things about that, James?
Yes, he has. And of course, even just right before Charlie's murder, he was talking about how he was basically single-handedly destroying Charlie's organization. Charlie, of course, there's been a text message that's been leaked now, referred to Nick as vermin, and he had scolded Dinesh D'Souza for debating him a few months ago, saying everything you do involving him raises his profile. Charlie wouldn't even mention his name in many cases, afraid to raise his profile. But like I said, Nick has targeted Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk for most of a decade. He was operating an organization parasitically off of Turning Point events to try to grow a following, and has been nothing but a problem for them. And now he's saying these awful things, whether it's about Charlie's wife, whether it's about Charlie's organization, whether it's about Charlie himself. And yet, yeah, Tucker decided to interview him in the most gentle, kind of, positive, let's give you a nice profile, not a hard hitting, it's not like he's interviewing Ted Cruz or something with a hard hitting interview, trying to drive into some details. And he's nevertheless, still the headliner for Turning Point's events. It's a very awkward situation. I think that, in fact, Tucker is doing this partly to attack Turning Point, if you ask me what my opinion is about that.
Is he trying to get Turning Point to cancel him and therefore create controversy?
Yeah, I mean, these are the two options that Turning Point really has. Unless it comes up with something very creative, it can either say, we draw the line here. This Nick Fuentes thing was too far. He was had so much animosity to TPUSA, to Charlie, to everything, that we draw the line, which I think actually they should do. At which point Tucker will say, well, I'm being censored. Turning Point USA is controlled by Jews, or whatever it happens to be. And they'll turn up the volume on an attack against TPUSA to maximum volume. Or Turning Point has the option to stand by Tucker Carlson and say, no, we're all going to unite. We're not going to break apart. Whatever we're all rowing in the same direction, I think is what Andrew Colvett said the other day, still defending Tucker in that tweet. And if they do that, then they take on this not just character of Nick Fuentes by kind of a transitive property of having given a profiling interview, but also the fact that Nick Fuentes, with all of his baggage, was a direct personal enemy of Charlie and everything he stood for. And Turning Point USA, he declared wars. He called them Groper wars on Turning Point USA repeatedly, trying to destroy the organization. So this puts Turning Point USA in a bind. They're in a very tough bind. I think the right option is to use this as the opportunity to draw the line and say that enough is enough. I don't know what Tucker's doing. We wish him well. We hope he gets back in alignment with clear thinking, but we can't have this at our event. But on the other hand, they're going to get attacked for that. They'll get viciously attacked.
I don't know, again, where Turning Point USA is going. I was on the air when Charlie was shot. I was on 74 Christian stations plus our TV network. Logan tells me in my ear, Charlie's been shot. I turned to the X to look, and there it all is in the gory. And we were on the air. I was on the air for over 8 hours. I was on the air for like 5 hours straight. Got up, had an hour off, went back on for another 2.5, 3 hours. And we covered it a lot for a good couple weeks. And we saw many positive things come out of the memorial service, and different strong statements being made about faith and finding a good Bible teaching church and other things that were really well said. But since then, some of the people that are platforming at these rallies around the country, I'm seeing such a hodgepodge of religious beliefs, of eschatological beliefs, of theological beliefs, that I said to my audience, if they don't get this under control, Turning Point USA, we're going to have to call them Turning Point into Apostasy USA, because they're getting very schizophrenic. They're all over the map. They need to pick a side and say, this is our theology, this is our eschatology. You're interviewing everybody from Doug Wilson, who is just about as out there as they come in the, quote, Christian world, with his hyper-Calvinism, Reconstructionism, which is basically, to me, a kind of a Christian Taliban, if you will, of the Seven Mountain Mandate, Reconstructionism. And then you have other people on, and it's running the gamut so much. I'm like, you're confusing the living daylights out of people. Whether they know it or not, you're confusing young people, okay? You cannot introduce them to good, solid people and then turn around and introduce them to people like Tucker Carlson. Not that you have to introduce him, but you're going to platform him apparently still. or Doug Wilson. I mean, they have got to pick their compass. Would you agree?
No, yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, what I've thought for a long time, not that it's my place, and I have had for up until the last year or so, I had a really close relationship with Turning Point USA and Charlie. And of course, I had a relationship, I still have a good relationship with Turning Point Faith, which is kind of interesting that that's the side that I still have the stronger relationship with. But at any rate, I've thought that since they have Turning Point Faith, that while faith can obviously bleed in, nobody has to leave their faith at the door. I think it's very important, I would think, for Turning Point USA to either declare clearly what theology they're standing for, or preferably to say, this is the secular side of the organization, this is the big tent political movement, and not make that the focus, where Turning Point Faith can then deal with, that level of clarity and its mission and state exactly what it's looking for, and to have that aspect available. But at the present moment, like you said, it's kind of anybody who has been a sufficiently loud voice on the right. And in fact, a lot of people who are following in the coattails of Tucker Carlson are kind of the lineup. If you want to know what this kind of schizophrenia looks like, I mean, Doug Wilson, for example, was welcomed into the Turning Point camp after Tucker Carlson gave him another one of these high-profiling interviews.
Yep.
At which point Charlie discovered him and thought, wow, this guy's great. And there's a lot going on under the hood that it's not clear that Charlie was fully aware of with Pastor Wilson. So, or maybe he was, I don't know. He's not here to speak for that. So, yeah, I agree with you. There needs to be some big clarity. I was talking to Charlie for most of the year prior to his murder, telling him that I know he's a big bridge builder. I know he's a big coalition guy, but it's going to be time to draw lines. And, I think he was trying to do the impossible. I just picture him like, Hercules or whatever, with his arms out trying to hold up the pillars of this huge coalition. And it was just a task that was really taxing for him. But I think that has left a situation now where lines have not been drawn, and that ambiguity is being taken advantage of in a very big and bad way, and that the organization has to do something about that.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And, my opinion, based on my discussions with Bill Federer, who's been a friend of mine for 30 years, and traveled to South Korea with Charlie the week before he was murdered, is that Charlie was talking about running for office. And I don't know how high at state or federal level, but if you're looking to use your platform to launch a campaign, then you keep all those kind of people around, right? But if you're not running for office, then you do well. If you want a viable long-term organization that's not schizophrenic, you pick your foundation, you pick your course, you have a compass, and you say, this is our mission, this is our doctrinal statement, this is where we're going, right? And I'm thinking that, I don't know, if pragmatism slipped in, is like, well, we got to do this because you have to build a big tent because I have to use it to go run for office. And I think that's what was going on. My gut tells me that's what he was doing.
I know that's part of it. I also know that Charlie was just a genuinely good man who believed he could reach both a lot of the people that are on this list of kind of questionable voices, but also people in the audience, these kind of lost young men, the lost boys of Gen Z or whatever, who feel so beaten down by feminism, cheated by COVID, struggling under the circumstances of the housing market and so on. Charlie was overwhelmingly concerned with them and wanted to reach them, and knew how easy it would be to alienate them. So I just picture the guy doing this Herculean task of trying to hold things together that cannot be held together. And now he's not here, so it becomes all that much more difficult.
Let's talk about what I refer to as the pincher strategy. I think that's a term that's used in the national security realms when you try to take a country or people and pinch them between two groups, kind of this Hegelian dialectic process, thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, and we pit groups against each other. I am increasingly, and I warned about this in my book in 2011, The Coming Religious, or that one was Trojan Horse, Religious Trojan Horse, 2011. And then again in my book, 2018, Marxianity, that Bible-believing, conservative, anti-communist, patriotic, constitutional republic Christians or patriots who hold to Christian ideals are increasingly going to find themselves pinched by the right and the left. And I actually, in my book in 2011, Religious Trojan Horse, predicted that the greatest persecution coming for Christians would be from the right, that the persecution would rise drastically from the right. And over the years, even as outspoken as I have been about communism, Islam, I had a gunman from Saudi Arabia come into my conference, filmed it, made a video brandishing 5 weapons, 2 semi-automatics, and he did 7 months in federal prison for that. But and yes, they did get the venues canceled when we were on the road with putting terrorist threats against our buildings. But aside from that and some emails, my greatest attacks that I at least know of have not come from the Islamists. They have come from people on the right, our so-called right, the religious right and the political right. But here we are pinched now in the middle, and that is increasing. The attacks, like Tucker Carlson saying, I hate the Christian Zionists the most. Well, that's me, okay? I'm a Christian and I'm a Zionist. I believe in the historical right of the land of the Jews. That makes me a Zionist. I also believe in their biblical right. That makes me a Christian Zionist. And he just said he hates the Christian Zionists the most. And the level of hatred coming against Christians, Zionists, Christian Zionists, and Jews from both the right and the left is ramping up in a way that I think it's setting up for Islam, frankly, to feel some justification to murder people. And as they go on their jihad or 0 hour or the perfect day or their own October 7th event, many on the right are taking these people and giving them, basically, in my opinion, the justification to murder Christian Zionists. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm extremely concerned about that. I mean, Tucker's been expressing how he's, the most disgusting people in the world to me. He's always talking about whoever's the most disgusting. And it always seems to be the people who are most opposed to whatever it is politically that he's trying to accomplish. And he comes up with some way to make it disgusting. But the rhetoric that you're talking about and the squeeze, I've been using the phrase dialectical scissors, as a matter of fact, for about a year now in a lot of the workshops that I've been doing and a lot of things I've been writing. The idea that, in fact, with the scissors, you have this, that the left blade is moved by the right hand and the right blade is moved by the left hand. So you have this kind of, activism from the left generates the cutting blade from the right, and vice versa. And I think that this situation is absolutely crucial for the American public to understand, and to understand the role of this radical or dissident or new or woke right in playing this game with the American conservative movement and the American public. And I don't doubt that what you're saying is, what you see with all dialectical activism, since you brought up that fancy word, is this kind of like generation of permission structures. Barack Obama was very good at generating permission structures for the radicals on the left to start filling in the gap and then running amok. And of course, by 2015, that's exactly what they were doing. And so what you see here with the kind of language and the arguments that Tucker and then a lot of these other guys online is that they're creating these permission structures, whether it's to hate Jews or to hate Christian Zionists or to hate dispensationalists or any Bible-believing Christians or whatever it happens to be, and whoever might end up taking advantage of those permission structures, whether it's Muslims or otherwise, once they're there, you have a real problem on your hands. And so what we're watching is those permission structures being built out. It's creating that pincher, like you said, which my Jewish friends, by the way, call the Jew squeeze. Like, they're very aware of the Jew squeeze, where you ramp up the anti-Semitism on the left and then ramp it up on the right and squeeze them so they have nowhere to hide, nowhere to go. I keep getting told, actually, now you know what it's like to be a Jew, because I've been squeezed out of the left and squeezed out of the right. And where they all go, and Zionism, is they all go to Israel. They make Aliyah, and until I went there this past week, I didn't understand why you would go to what amounts to an active war zone in the Middle East, but you actually feel safer there. It's amazing. So I'm very concerned, to answer your question again directly, with this building out of permission structures and this savvy attack from the radicals on each side. And I agree with you completely. I called my friend that I work with back early in January of 2021. I had a run-in with some of these radicals on the right and talked to them for a little bit. And I became so alarmed that I called him and was like, Listen, as much as we're doing about the left and as big as a problem the left is that the radical right, there's a day coming where it'll be unambiguous that it is the bigger problem for American freedom and the American Republic. And we're going to have to prepare for that day. So I agree with you completely.
And isn't that interesting? You and I are now meeting for the first time. We're using some of the same phrases. I call it the pincher strategy. You're calling it the scissor strategy, basically. You know, we're using some of the same, but that's because we both have studied the Hegelian dialectic, George Hegel, influenced, of course, Karl Marx. So we study the same philosophies and ideas and worldviews and values that bring us to the same conclusions, which I always find fascinating when I meet someone and find out we are having the same conclusions, and yet we haven't really read each other's stuff other than me reading occasionally some of your tweets. I didn't know you were saying that. And so it's confirmation we're on the right track. Because sometimes you wonder, am I on the right track or am I reading into this too much? And I'm sure you do that same thing. You know, we have this group, the Reconstructionists, the Dominionists. And I hate to say it, but apparently Pete Hegseth is being influenced and going to one of Doug Wilson's plant churches in Tennessee. And, you know, these people, I call them the Christian Taliban, right? They want to put us back up under the 10 Commandments. They think we're the new Israel. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And they got their prophets. And then some of them in the New Apostolic Reformation, not to confuse the Reconstructionist and the Dominionist with the New Apostolic, because these are different groups, but they kind of run together in some ways. But then you got the New Apostolic with their prophets and apostles who think they're raising the dead, healing the blind. You know, they're absolute freaks, you know, and I wrote extensively about them in my book, Religious Trojan Horse. And yet you've got Tony Perkins, the American Family Association, American Family Radio Network. You got some of the biggest pro-life, pro-family leaders uniting up with these so-called modern-day prophets and apostles that are, you know, they're just way out there. And we're talking now about making alliances with people, many of them, that look at us as though we're as much the problem as the Islamist. The way they talk about Bible-believing Christian dispensationalists, in some cases, they talk worse about us. And some of them, ironically, are taking money from Qatar, I think.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised to find that out, especially after, you know, the emphasis that I heard when I was in Israel over the past week and a half or so. It's just how often we'd have these kinds of conversations. And it's, I don't know, where there's smoke, there's not always fire, but there usually is. But the word Qatar basically came up every time. So that's the big concern there. And, you know, Christian Taliban is one way to put this. Christian Gramsciists, for people who understand the
Antonio Gramsci
institution. Yeah. That's right. Antonio Gramsci and his cultural Marxist or Western Marxist emphasis on what he called boring from within, going inside the institutions and taking over. That's what the Seven Mountain Mandate is all about. We're going to take over these cultural institutions and we're going to force people to transform their values by producing the culture around them through these culture producing institutions. And then we can have a revolution in the name of our program. And so what you see is this same kind of idea that's kind of the dead opposite of the Great Commission. It's not going around and converting hearts. It's not going around and converting minds. It's through persuasion and friendship and, you know, charity and all of the different Christian virtues. It's instead, you know, we're going to set up a political order where, you know, you don't have to be a Christian, but it's going to be really uncomfortable if you're not. So you coerce people into kind of this false belief. And then you hear, I mean, I don't think he's one of them specifically. I don't even know where he falls in the religious ladder, but you got this kind of funding mogul named Charles Haywood that's written this crazy foundationalist manifesto. I know he's connected to a lot of this Christian nationalism movement. He's funded a lot of it. He runs the Society for American Civic Renewal. And he's got this manifesto, and one of the pillars of the manifesto is this Christian nationalism. And he actually says in there that he just doesn't care if people actually believe Christianity or not. What he cares is that they act Christian and profess Christianity in public because it'll create a better social order. And it's just like spitting on the Great Commission when you see that. So this is a really concerning movement as well. And I share your concerns here.
Well, and I know I want to let you go because I know you got jet lagged like crazy coming back from Israel. But then you got Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel is kind of running in this same camp of people, right? Now he's, of course, all concerned about the Antichrist. And we can either have Antichrist or Armageddon, or maybe we can have a third system, you know, a third thing we create. And he's running in that crowd. So it seems as though, once again, people with bigger agendas are buying up so-called Christianity, a segment of Christianity, a segment of evangelicalism, a segment of the Protestant world. They're buying up the conservative area for a bigger agenda. And I don't know where J.D. Vance is going to come down in all this, but I'm a little more concerned about his relationship with Peter Thiel. He was asked last night about Palantir and all that at Ole Miss in about an hour and 10 minutes where I'm sitting right now. It seemed like a lot of the questions, I'm told by the young 20-somethings in our control room, that a lot of the questions last night to J.D. Vance were coming from Nick Fuentes people. Those are Nick questions, the kind of things Nick talks about. And if that is, again, an indication of how much Nick is penetrating the young college students, we're in big trouble. But J.D. Vance is going to have to also pick a side here very quickly, because I hear a lot of people that are about ready to be done with J.D. Vance after he's no longer Trump's vice president. What are your thoughts?
I'm hearing exactly the same thing. And again, I agree. What I think people need to understand about these activities, you said a lot of these young people coming in and commenting are Nick Fuentes questions or Nick Fuentes people, maybe. Well, I need people to understand that the left did the same thing. The queer theorists in particular, but the BLM people also, kind of both of those again, another scissor, arms of the leftist woke movement. What they would do is when people, especially the Democrats or whatever, would have a major event, they would make sure that they would have their people go and that their people would line up as early as possible to be one of the people who asks a question, and then they would ask a very destabilizing question. They would inject their radical politics as a kind of strategic resistance or whatever to attack the person on stage. Well, that in queer theory is called queering. When you take something and you inject queer theory into it, they call it queering. They take the word queer and turn it into a verb. Well, Nick Fuentes calls this activity groping after his movement, which he's named the Groypers, Groyper. It's named after a cartoon frog. It takes a lot to explain how stupid this is. It's very internet. But anyway, to groip has become a verb, and it means to show up and ask these kinds of, very radical questions, specifically to kind of take the speaker and put them in an awkward position. They did this to Glenn Beck when he spoke at one of these Turning Point activities. This is more proof that Nick Fuentes is attacking Turning Point. He says that just the other day that the groyping of Turning Point events will continue. So he's sending these people. What proportion of young people, what proportion of the crowd they are is very unclear, because the goal is to make it look like they're a large segment of the audience by putting them up on the question. But maybe that's just a few. When Glenn Beck did it, they then take the video, they make it look like Glenn Beck didn't know how to answer, even though he did, and they try to embarrass him and make it look like they're a cultural force. The left did this as well, but Glenn actually answered splendidly. Other people dug that up and showed it, and once they saw that, Glenn gave these great answers, the crowd erupts like their team won the Super Bowl. So I don't know how endemic this actually is, or how much of it is an image being created by a manipulation of the media space, which is a technique we should be familiar with from Antifa, BLM, and the queer theorists that we've been dealing with for 5 or 10 years. But it's concerning. You have literally the vice president of the United States being put on the spot by 18-year-olds who've been radicalized online with awkward questions that allege blood libels against the Jews. This is a serious situation, no matter how you cut it.
So, final question. Don't hold back. What do you see happening to our country in the next 12 to 24 months? Based on China and, of course, their move or lack thereof against Taiwan, what's going on with North Korea. Putin has just tested the Poseidon, which is something we've been covering now since 2018, that unmanned torpedo can carry a huge warhead on it. We've got Russia and Ukraine, and of course, we're behind that with the Central Intelligence Agency. We're encouraging Zelensky to strike deeper and help him strike deeper into Russia. You have NATO, which is a lot of those European nations are on the verge of financial collapse. Elon said that Europe is on the verge of a civil war. I don't know if the Democrats are going to open the government and fund SNAP here in the U.S., but people are making videos about shooting each other over groceries. You look at the whole globe, and it seems like to me, in some ways, this is all being orchestrated. Again, the Hegelian dialectic. It's like James McGregor Burns said in his book, 1984, The Power to Lead. The founding fathers have been too shrewd for us, too smart for us. Frail tinkering and bridges won't get the job done. Only under a stupendous national crisis where we get the people to go where we want them to go. Something to me smells like we're being set up correct. And I'm not sure President Trump even understands the levers being pulled here. But we're being set up even on a global scale for a house of cards to collapse, whether we're talking about what is said to be $17 trillion in fraudulent Ponzi scheme school bonds, to the derivatives the banks are holding. I mean, we could turn around and talk all day about all the tipping points, but it seems to me something's being set up so we go to a whole new system, digital system, ID system, Agenda 21, 16.9, everybody's, got a ID, we've numbered everybody. It is not, aside from the spiritual aspect of it, it's not coincidental. The nations, and particularly the Western societies, once were underpinned by a strong Christian worldview. Of course, out of Europe, you had the abolitionist movement getting birthed by Christians out of a print shop. When you look at what's really collapsing is the traditionally Christian westernized societies to then bring about the new system. What are your closing comments on what people should be seeing, looking at, and expecting in the next 12 to 24 months, particularly as we look toward the midterms and 2028?
We're being put to the test right now. This is the test. Back in January, the day before the inauguration, I was asked to speak for PragerU in DC. So I was there in the Lincoln Room in the Waldorf Astoria that used to be the Trump International. And rather than speaking about education, I kind of wiggled it in a little bit. I was supposed to talk about education, but I just gave a warning that the test was coming. And I warned about this rising radical right and this idea of the scissors. And I wanted the people in the room, even though they're high as a kite, they were calling everything, it's conservative Disneyland. And I was like, Disneyland's in Burbank, which is by the Palisades, which is on fire. Let's calm down about how good things are right now. We're about to go through a test. This test will be domestic. It will be this squeeze or this scissor operation, this pincher operation you're talking about. I think that the Democrats are going to try to set themselves up to look sane, while the right, dragged by people like Tucker Carlson and others that are leading it, Nick Fuentes, is going to go even more insane. So then all of a sudden the Democrats look reasonable. You see the midterms going sideways for Trump and his agenda, and who knows what comes. Worst case scenario, they impeach him and throw him out of office. Best case scenario, they just neuter him for the last 2 years of his term. Either way, it's not a good scene. That's the big fear if we can't contain this radical right movement, at least on the domestic front. But then when you start looking at the global situation, I agree with everything you said. And I just want to add, especially after coming back from Israel and having different briefings, that the relevance of Gaza and what's happening around Gaza to the global agenda, in particular China's agenda, is absolutely crucial to understand. Gaza is kind of, in a sense, a fulcrum upon which, and the Archimedean point upon which they're trying to move the entire world. The main operation that we've dealt with from both left and right, that pincher, is what I referred to as Operation Gaza Floyd, which was to get Americans on the left and the right, especially young ones, to turn against the alliance between Israel and the United States, which is crucial to maintaining that security. But Gaza, based on where it's located and based on the bigger picture of its relationship with the rest of the Arab world, is central to China's Belt and Road Initiative program. So we're talking about a massive global realignment that's being attempted. And it depends on American citizens, mostly American conservatives, because the left is basically lost. American conservatives getting clear-eyed very quickly about the fact that they're being dragged into the propaganda that supports the biggest enemies of the United States possible, not just by outside forces that are mimicking, MAGA patriots online, but by long-standing trusted names like Tucker Carlson, who, for whatever reason, which I could only speculate upon, are advancing this propaganda. I'll just point out, since you started out talking about Nick Fuentes with his video talking about how great China is, which I think I shared, actually. One of my friends dug that up and sent it to me. I'll point out that in those videos where he's praising China, he's actually talking about how what America needs is a Chinese-style social credit system, that we need to be put on the same program, including with Chinese soldiers in the street, he said, in order to manage all of our different degeneracies. So it doesn't matter if it's a left-wing ESG social credit system that puts us into the leftist program to diminish ourselves so China can rise and take power uncontested, or if we put ourselves on a social credit system in order to fight back with so-called, ersatz Christian values that aren't actually Christian values at all. We still end up on the system, at which point we're manipulable, we're controllable, And we have lost the freedom that's necessary to be able to put up the fight and to form the strategic alliances, like with countries like Israel, that are necessary to prevent this global move by China, Russia, Iran, Qatar, and the kind of the new axis of evil. So the test is coming. The test is in fact beginning. And the test depends on faithful American patriots on the conservative side of the aisle, and some that are actually on the left, but horrified by what's happening, to start to realize that American freedom is the thing that stops this, that our strategic partnership and relationship for security goals and other tech goals with Israel is what stops this, and that everything in the world with billions of dollars behind it is being dedicated to making sure that those things fail. And we have to stand and pass this test, or else we find ourselves under a global CCP boot that we're going to have a very hard time ever getting out from under.
I'm sorry, I have to ask then. I need to let you go, but I have to ask then, are you saying that, because I've been saying that I believe Gaza could very well be a global, used as a global example of look what we can do when we take Gaza and we digitize everything. We have a PDF, and we have shown the PDF where they're openly talking about turning Gaza into a whole digital system. Everything's gonna be digital. It's basically a World Economic Forum 15-minute city. That's what we're gonna do with Gaza. And I said, folks, if they can take this region, which they've now spent the last 2+ years showing you, hell on earth, and then they can now scrape it and build back this freedom center, that's going to be the model for all of us. If we can get the Jews and the Hamas and Palestinians to live side by side in some kind of harmony where we all behave ourselves, as I think Ellison is the one that said, they're all on video, they're all going to behave themselves. That then can be used as the model. I don't know what's going to go on the Ben Gurion port. They want to cut through there as well, but I smell a lot of money interest, and I smell Gaza being used as a platform for the rest of the world. Is that what I just heard you also saying?
This is what I'm also concerned about. This is why we have to have this this alignment. Israel has to be able to do what it needs to do correctly, rather than setting up this gigantic globalist program, which, like you said, becomes the model. This is the real, like, if you want to criticize Israel for something, to make sure that they don't do the wrong thing, it's something like that we need to prevent, because what the average Israeli, from my experience over there in the past week, not that I'm a total expert, what they see is, they're being attacked by terrorists who have done the worst things possible to their people, and they need to defend themselves in a security interest. Building a smart city out of that place, the smart city, is a terrible direction to go. And so everything hinges around that, but it also hinges around it because of the Belt and Road Initiative program. It's not just that they have this opportunity for the model, but if China takes control of various, ports, as you mentioned, in the area, or various the canals in the area, that's their maritime route, if they can establish what they were trying to establish on the land route through Iran, which the U.S.-Israeli alliance threatens, then we find ourselves in an economic situation where the U.S. is in a very bad position going forward. Hence, them pushing this America First, turning into America Only movement to derange American conservatives to not understand the crucial aspects of the area over there and what all's happening. And we have to have this freedom movement with its eyes wide open and clear, being able to speak clearly into that situation on all of these aspects, or else we're in a big problem in the next 2 to 3 years.
All of these crises, you have to look at them as a manufactured crisis or an exploited crisis to get the people to go where they otherwise would not go. And I'm looking at many things, including the flooding of our country with the illegals to create division, murder, chaos, hate crimes, as they call them, because people now start reacting. Let's poke the Christian in the eye and the patriot in the eye until they say the things, out of frustration. Then we can say, see, we told you there were haters. Now we need hate crime laws. So they're gaslighting everybody. And we could use the collapse of the border, or now the SNAP program. And now all of a sudden it's all over the news about how many people, 59% of illegals are on SNAP, how many people are selling their SNAP. They don't even use it. They sell it for cash so that they can then go buy drugs or alcohol or whatever else they want to do with it. Maybe a new pair of sneakers or who knows what. Now, we need to cut that down. We need to get rid of that. All right, let's get everybody biometric chip. Give everybody a biometric. So now we know they're not abusing their SNAP and selling their SNAP. Watch how every crisis is either created to be exploited or is a crisis they then exploit. But the end is the new system. And I think that's what's coming. And we could talk for hours. And I want to get you back. But in the meantime, I think people should go right here and follow you. He's got about 550,000 people following him, which I'm thankful for, because we need people to be, particularly young people, to be following him to counter the lies of people like Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and the others. Follow him. Conceptual U Ames. Is that it? Yep. No, Conceptual James. Conceptual, it looks like a U there, doesn't it? But it's the L and the J making almost a U. Conceptual James. Am I saying that right?
Conceptual James.
Yep, at Conceptual James. So follow him, and we look forward to having you back. And let's talk about us paying you an honorarium and your hotel, and come on over a few hours from where you're at, and let's do several hours in the studio.
Sounds like a great time. Thank you.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much, James. Appreciate your being with us tonight.
Yes, sir.
James Lindsay, checking in, folks. Check him out there. Follow him on X. All right? We'll be right back after this break. Go to worldviewtalk.com. Get your satellite phone like I have, because you know what? China is in on our power grid. That is a matter of proven fact. If you want to have communications with your loved ones, your family, your children, maybe your spouse travels, maybe you have a child away at college, you want communication should the grid go down. That's why you need a satellite phone, worldviewtalk.com. But look what else they have. They also have solar generators. I have one of their solar generators. I have the Delta Echo 400, a solar generator. So I can, of course, charge my satellite phone. I can run my coffee pot. I can run my whole house if I want to. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com, or use that number, 1-866-738-3224. They have very friendly operators that will explain to you their products, but you can explain to them what it is you're desiring to acquire. How much electricity are you wanting to generate with this solar generator? Well, they'll tell you what size you need. Worldviewtalk.com or 1-866-738-3224.